Hazel, after careful consideration, we've decided to move in a new direction with the database management division. Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. The tech industry requires fresh perspectives, and frankly, your methods are replaceable and outdated. HR will contact you Monday regarding final paperwork. I stared at the text message on my phone, reading it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. 20 years at Vanguard Systems, countless late nights, missed family dinners, and weekend troubleshooting sessions, all dismissed in a text message sent at 7:13 a.m. on a Saturday morning. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I considered my response. Despite the shock and the creeping sense of betrayal, I defaulted to the professionalism that had defined my career. Thank you for your help all these years, Mr. Patterson. It's been a pleasure. I'll await HR's instructions. My name is Hazel Winters, 59 years old, and until approximately 3 minutes ago, I was the Senior Systems Integration Specialist at Vanguard Systems in Portland, Oregon. I'm a single mother who put my daughter through college working for this company. I've survived 4 CEOs, 6 office relocations, and the complete overhaul of our product line, twice. What I want is simple: to be treated with the dignity and respect my 2 decades of service deserve. Standing in my way is Alexander Patterson, the 36-year-old CEO who took over when his father retired last year. Alexander, with his Stanford MBA and Silicon Valley internships, has been determined to modernize the company since day one. Apparently, that modernization now includes discarding loyal employees via text message. Setting my phone down on the kitchen counter, I moved to the window and looked out at the misty Portland morning. My modest home, with 15 years of mortgage payments left, suddenly seemed less secure. At 59, I was now unemployed in an industry that worshipped youth and novelty. My daughter Jenna had just started graduate school, relying on my help with her rent. The injustice of it all burned in my chest. My phone buzzed again. A second message from Patterson. Please ensure all company materials are returned to security by Tuesday. We'll need your badges, laptop, and any documentation related to the Hermes project. The transition team will take over your accounts. The Hermes project, our flagship database security system, the product that generated 60% of the company's revenue. The system I had built from the ground up, pieced together with custom code that wasn't documented anywhere except in my own meticulous notes. I almost laughed. The transition team. As if my role could be summarized in a few handover documents and Slack channels. What Alexander Patterson didn't realize, what none of them understood, was that I wasn't just a cog in their machine. I was the architect who had designed the system while the official developers took credit. I was the institutional memory that connected disparate elements no one else fully comprehended. I was the translator between the old architecture and the new platforms, and I was the only person alive who knew how to fix the Hermes project when it inevitably crashed during the annual security protocol update, scheduled for exactly 2 weeks from today. I joined Vanguard Systems in 2001, when it was still a struggling startup operating out of a converted warehouse in downtown Portland. Robert Patterson, Alexander's father, hired me as a database analyst despite my unconventional background. I didn't have a computer science degree. I taught myself programming while working as an administrative assistant at a law firm, building custom databases to track cases when the firm couldn't afford commercial software. You've got something better than a degree, Robert had told me during my interview. You've got intuition and practical experience. You solve real problems. Under Robert's leadership, I thrived. As the company grew, so did my responsibilities. I moved from basic database maintenance to systems integration, becoming the connection point between our legacy systems and newer technologies. When we developed the Hermes project, a revolutionary database security system that became our flagship product, I was part of the core team, though my contribution was largely behind the scenes. My colleagues respected me, especially the old guard who remembered the early days. The developers would come to my desk when they hit roadblocks, and I'd help them troubleshoot code or suggest workarounds. Hazel Knows became an unofficial company motto whenever someone encountered a system quirk no one else could explain. At home, I was raising Jenna alone after her father left when she was 4. The flexibility Robert offered was invaluable. When Jenna had school events or got sick, I could work remotely, making up hours on evenings and weekends. The company became my second family, and I repaid that loyalty with unwavering dedication. Everything changed when Robert retired. Alexander returned from his Silicon Valley ventures to take over, bringing with him a cadre of young consultants with slick presentations about digital transformation and agile methodologies. I tried to embrace the new direction. I attended the workshops, learned the new frameworks, and adjusted my workflow. But Alexander's attitude toward the veteran employees was dismissive at best, condescending at worst. In meetings, he would cut me off mid-sentence or redirect my questions to one of his new hires, even when they didn't know the answers. "We need to shed the legacy thinking," he announced during one all-hands meeting, his gaze sweeping over those of us who had been there longest. Still, I persisted. The company had supported me through difficult times, and I genuinely cared about our products and clients. When Alexander implemented a new project management system that didn't integrate with our existing databases, I spent weekends building custom scripts to bridge the gap, work that went unrecognized but kept operations running smoothly. There were warning signs I chose to ignore: my exclusion from strategic meetings I had previously attended, the gradual reassignment of my direct reports to newer managers, my relocation to a smaller office away from the development team. I attributed it to reorganization pains rather than a systematic effort to minimize my role. I believed that my institutional knowledge and problem-solving abilities would ultimately be recognized as valuable. As it turned out, I was both right and catastrophically wrong. The Monday after the text message, I drove to Vanguard Systems headquarters for the last time. The security guard at the entrance, Tony, who had greeted me by name every morning for 15 years, looked uncomfortable as he handed me a visitor badge instead of scanning my employee ID. "I'm sorry, Ms. Winters," he said quietly. "They've already deactivated your credentials." "I understand, Tony, not your fault." In the HR office, Diane from People Operations avoided eye contact as she slid termination paperwork across the desk. "We've prepared a severance package," she said, her voice professionally detached. 2 months' salary, continuation of benefits through the end of the quarter, and... "Is Alexander in today?" I interrupted. Diane hesitated. "Mr. Patterson is in meetings all morning." "Convenient," I murmured, signing where indicated. 20 years, and he can't face me in person. "Hazel." Diane lowered her voice, glancing toward the closed door. "This wasn't my decision. Several of us advocated for you, but..." "It's fine." I cut her off, not wanting her pity. Business is business. As I packed my personal belongings under the watchful eye of a security contractor I'd never seen before, I noticed Garrett Davis, the new chief technology officer, hovering near my office door. "Hazel," he said, stepping forward with a tablet in hand. "Before you go, we need to verify a few technical details about the Hermes project's integration protocols." I raised an eyebrow. "Now you want my input?" Garrett forced a smile. "It's just standard documentation completion. The development team is preparing for the annual security protocol update, and there seem to be some gaps in the knowledge transfer." "Gaps," I repeated, carefully placing my eldest family photo, Jenna's 5th grade graduation, into my cardboard box. "Funny how those appear when you fire the person who built the system." "You didn't build Hermes," Garrett said dismissively. "You were part of the maintenance team." The casual erasure of my contribution, the years of late nights solving problems the real developers couldn't fix, the elegant workarounds that kept the system stable through 3 major architecture changes, ignited something cold and hard in my chest. "Check the repository logs," I suggested mildly. "My name's on over 60% of the custom integration modules, but I'm sure your transition team will figure it out. They're getting paid for fresh perspectives, after all." Garrett's smile faltered. "Just a few questions, Hazel. Where are the override protocols documented for when the authentication server rejects the annual security certificate updates?" I knew exactly what he was asking. The Hermes project had a critical flaw in its original design, one that the official documentation didn't acknowledge. Every year, when the security certificates updated, the system would reject the new protocols unless a specific series of manual interventions were performed in a precise sequence. I had discovered the workaround during the first implementation and had personally handled the update process every year since. It's all in the documentation, I lied smoothly. Standard protocols. We've checked the documentation, Garrett pressed. There's nothing about. Then I guess the transition team will have to earn their fresh perspectives, I replied, closing my box. My methods are replaceable and outdated, remember? As I walked through the office for the final time, past the desks of colleagues who avoided meeting my gaze, the reality of what had happened, and what was about to happen, settled over me like a weight. 20 years of loyalty, countless contributions that went unrecognized in official channels, and critical knowledge that existed only in my head. Alexander Patterson had grossly miscalculated. He thought he was discarding an obsolete component, but he had actually severed the neural pathway that kept his company's most profitable product functioning. I wasn't ready to act on this realization, not yet. But as I loaded my single box of belongings into my car, I understood with perfect clarity that I held the power to either save Vanguard systems or watch it implode from a distance. The choice was entirely mine. 3 days after clearing out my office, I was sitting at my kitchen table updating my resume when my phone rang. The caller ID displayed Vanguard Systems. Hello? Hazel, thank God. It was Kevin Zhao, the senior developer I'd mentored for years. His voice was tight with stress. I'm not supposed to be calling you, but we're having a serious issue with the Hermes authentication modules. I took a sip of tea, letting the silence stretch for a moment before responding. I'm sorry to hear that, Kevin. The pre-update diagnostics are failing. The system's rejecting our test protocols, and nobody can figure out why. The desperation in his voice was unmistakable. Garrett's had us reviewing code for 2 days straight, but there's nothing in the documentation about this error pattern. That sounds frustrating, I said carefully. Hazel, please. The annual update is scheduled for next week. If we can't resolve this, our client's systems will reject the new security certificates. It would be catastrophic. I closed my eyes, picturing the Vanguard offices in chaos, developers hunched over keyboards, Garrett pacing and barking orders, Alexander demanding solutions. Part of me wanted to savor their predicament, to let them stew in the consequences of discarding me like outdated equipment. Kevin, I don't work for Vanguard anymore, I reminded him gently. Alexander made it clear my methods were replaceable. He was wrong, Kevin said bluntly. Everyone knows that. This isn't just about the company, it's about the clients who depend on our security systems. Real businesses with real people. The appeal to my conscience was effective. Despite everything, I couldn't simply let our clients suffer. Check line 1457 in the authentication module. I relented. There's a legacy verification protocol that needs to be temporarily disabled before certificate updates. I heard Kevin's fingers clacking on a keyboard. That's undocumented, he murmured. Why would that? Never mind, I see it now. Hazel, you're a lifesaver. Good luck, I said, and ended the call. Over the next week, my phone lit up repeatedly with calls and texts from various Vanguard employees, each facing unexpected obstacles as they prepared for the update. I provided minimal guidance, enough to keep them moving forward, but not enough to fully resolve their issues. Each call confirmed what I had long suspected. The systems I had maintained for years were a complicated tapestry of official protocols interwoven with my custom fixes, none of which had been properly documented or understood by management. Then came the call I had been both expecting and dreading. Hazel, it's Alexander Patterson. His voice had lost the smooth confidence I remembered, replaced by a barely concealed panic. Hello, Alexander. How can I help you? I kept my tone neutral, professional. We're experiencing some technical difficulties with the Hermes update. The team suggested you might have insights that could help expedite a resolution. I see. And what exactly seems to be the problem? The entire authentication system is rejecting the update protocols. We've tried everything in the documentation, but nothing's working. The company's reputation, our client's security, is at stake. I allowed myself a small, private smile. That does sound serious. We'd like to bring you in as a consultant to resolve this issue. We're prepared to offer a generous day rate for your expertise. Here it was, the lifeline I had anticipated. Alexander needed me now, and he was willing to pay for the knowledge he had so casually dismissed days earlier. It was tempting to refuse outright, to let him face the catastrophic failure that loomed. I'm available for consultation, I said instead. My rate is $2,500 per day, with a minimum commitment of 2 weeks. Alexander didn't even hesitate. Done. Can you start tomorrow? I'm sorry, but I've actually accepted a position with another company, I said, the lie coming easily. I could potentially offer limited phone consultation after hours. Another company? Already? Alexander sounded genuinely shocked, as if he'd never considered I might be valuable to someone else. Yes, Atlantic Data Services. I start next Monday. The silence on the line told me everything. Atlantic Data wasn't a direct competitor, but they operated in adjacent spaces. Having their newest employee rescue Vanguard from a crisis would be humiliating for Alexander. I see, he finally said. What would it take to secure your full attention until our update is complete? Name your price. The desperation in his voice should have been satisfying. Instead, it felt hollow. Confirmation that I had only ever been a resource to exploit, never a colleague to respect. I'll think about it, I replied, and get back to you tomorrow. As I hung up, I realized Alexander had inadvertently given me something invaluable, a glimpse of my own power. I hadn't actively sabotaged anything. I'd simply walked away with the knowledge they had never bothered to document. That alone had brought a $40 million company to its knees in less than a week. The question now was what to do with this unexpected leverage. The next morning, I decided to explore the possibility of actually working for Atlantic Data Services rather than using them as a fictional escape route. Their website listed several open positions, including a systems integration consultant role that matched my experience perfectly. On impulse, I submitted my resume and a customized cover letter. Within hours, I received a call from their HR department requesting a preliminary interview. By the end of the day, I had spoken with both the HR director and the head of their integration team. The connection was immediate. They valued my experience rather than viewing it as obsolescence, and they seemed genuinely excited about the institutional knowledge I could bring. We'd like to bring you in for a formal interview tomorrow, the HR director said. The team is very impressed with your background. As I hung up, my phone buzzed with another call from Vanguard, this time from Garrett Davis. Hazel, the situation is critical, he said without preamble. We've got less than a week until the update goes live, and we're nowhere close to resolving the authentication issues. Alexander said you might be available as a consultant? I'm considering it, I replied, though I'm surprised the transition team is having such difficulty. I was told my methods were outdated. Garrett's sigh was heavy with frustration. Look, we both know Alexander handled your departure poorly. But this is bigger than that now. Our clients include 3 major financial institutions and a government contractor. If their security systems fail? I understand the stakes, Garrett. That's why my consultation fee is non-negotiable. Whatever Alexander offered, we'll pay it. Just tell us what you need. I considered my response carefully. I'll need complete access to the system remotely. No supervision, no micromanagement. And I want it in writing that any solutions I provide remain my intellectual property, licensed to Vanguard for this specific implementation only. That's not standard. Neither is firing someone by text message after 20 years of service, I interrupted. Those are my terms. After a moment's hesitation, Garrett agreed. Within the hour, I received a formal consultation agreement from Vanguard's legal team, along with remote access credentials to their development environment. I spent that evening examining the Hermes system, confirming what I already knew. Without my specific interventions, the authentication modules would fail catastrophically during the update. The solution wasn't particularly complex, but it required intimate knowledge of the system's quirks and historical workarounds, knowledge that existed only in my head. The next day, I attended my interview at Atlantic Data. It went even better than I'd hoped. They were genuinely impressed by my experience, asking thoughtful questions about my approach to systems integration and legacy system management. By the end of the 3-hour session, they extended an offer, a senior position with a salary 30% higher than what I'd made at Vanguard, plus benefits and a flexible work arrangement. "We need someone with your depth of experience," the director explained. "Someone who can see the connections between systems that others miss." I accepted on the spot, with a requested start date in 2 weeks, giving me time to resolve the Vanguard crisis without conflicting interests. That evening, as I prepared to implement the fixes for Hermes, my phone rang again. It was Robert Patterson, Alexander's father and the former CEO. "Hazel, I just heard what happened," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I want you to know that this is not how I built this company, not how I taught Alexander to lead." "I know, Robert," I said, genuinely touched by his call. "Alexander told me they've had to bring you back as a consultant because no one can figure out the update process," he continued. "It confirmed what I always knew, that your contributions went far beyond what was formally recognized." I stayed silent, unsure how to respond. "The board is meeting tomorrow," Robert added. "Alexander's leadership is being questioned. The Hermes crisis has shaken their confidence, and there are rumors about other key employees planning to leave." This was unexpected. I had anticipated creating problems for Alexander, but potentially causing his removal as CEO? That seemed excessive, even given his treatment of me. "What are you telling me, Robert?" "I'm telling you that you have more power right now than you realize," he said carefully. "How you handle this situation could determine the future leadership of Vanguard Systems." After we hung up, I sat motionless, absorbing this new information. What had begun as a personal slight, a disrespectful dismissal after years of service, had evolved into something with far greater implications. The choices I made in the next few days wouldn't just affect Alexander, they could reshape the entire company. The question was no longer whether I could bring Alexander Patterson down. The question was whether I should. After a restless night weighing my options, I made my decision. I would neither sabotage Vanguard nor rescue it completely. Instead, I would fulfill my consulting agreement to the letter, providing exactly what they had asked for and nothing more. I began implementing the necessary fixes for the Hermes update, documenting each step meticulously. The fixes themselves were elegantly simple once you understood the system's idiosyncrasies. I estimated I could complete the work in 3 days instead of the 2 weeks they had agreed to pay for. Midway through the first day, Garrett called. "How's it going?" "Making progress?" "Steadily," I replied. "The issues are more or less what I expected." "Great. Listen, Alexander wants daily reports on your progress. Could you join a leadership call at 4 p.m.? I hesitated. "That wasn't part of our agreement. I'm working independently, remember?" "Just a 15-minute status update," Garrett pressed. "It would go a long way toward smoothing things over." Against my better judgment, I agreed. At 4 p.m. sharp, I joined the video call to find not just Garrett and Alexander, but the entire executive team and 2 board members. "Hazel," Alexander began without preamble, "we'd like a comprehensive explanation of what went wrong with the Hermes project and why these issues weren't properly documented." The ambush was obvious. This wasn't a status update. It was an attempt to shift blame for the crisis onto me. "I'm happy to provide a status update on the current fixes," I replied calmly. "As for documentation gaps, that would require a separate analysis beyond the scope of our consulting agreement. Given the critical nature of this failure, I think we deserve a full explanation," insisted Vivian Ross, a board member I'd never met. I took a measured breath. With respect, what Vanguard deserves and what our agreement covers are different matters. I'm implementing the necessary fixes for the authentication system as contracted. If you'd like to discuss a separate engagement for system documentation review, we can certainly do that. Alexander's face tightened with barely concealed anger. This isn't a negotiation, Hazel. You were responsible for these systems for years. If there are undocumented processes, that failure falls on you. Something in me snapped. Does it? Let's review the facts. For 3 years, I submitted formal requests for additional resources to properly document the Hermes integration processes. Each request was denied due to budget constraints. Last year, I created a comprehensive training program for the development team, which was canceled when you decided to streamline operations. 6 months ago, I explicitly warned about the risks of undocumented processes during the annual security update. That email was sent to everyone on this call. Silence fell over the virtual meeting. I continued, my voice steady. Furthermore, I spent my final 2 weeks at Vanguard creating transition documents for my successor, documents that were apparently ignored. So no, Alexander, this failure doesn't fall on me. It falls on a leadership team that systematically undervalued institutional knowledge in favor of fresh perspectives. The board members exchanged glances. One of them, James Wheeler, leaned forward. You mentioned an email warning about this specific issue? Yes. Dated January 15th. Sent to the executive distribution list and the development leads. I believe the subject was critical documentation gaps in Hermes authentication protocols. Several people were now visibly searching through their email archives. Alexander's expression had shifted from anger to alarm. I'll continue with the contracted fixes, I concluded. You'll have a fully functional system for the update. But I won't accept responsibility for management decisions that created this situation. I ended the call before anyone could respond. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing with messages, first from Garrett, then from James Wheeler, and finally from Robert Patterson. Hazel, the board is calling an emergency session. Would you be willing to speak candidly about the state of the Hermes project? Robert. I stared at the message, understanding its implications. The board was considering action against Alexander, and my testimony could be the deciding factor. It was more power than I had ever expected to have, or wanted. Meanwhile, a new complication emerged. As I dug deeper into the Hermes system, I discovered that Alexander's team had already attempted some fixes before calling me. Fixes that had further destabilized the core authentication modules. The damage was more extensive than I'd initially assessed, and correcting it would require significant reconstruction of key system components. The timeline suddenly became much tighter. The update was scheduled in 4 days, and clients were already being notified of the planned security enhancement. Missing this deadline would not only embarrass Vanguard, it would create genuine security vulnerabilities for their clients. I had a choice to make. I could complete only the work explicitly outlined in our agreement, leaving Vanguard to discover the additional issues on their own, or I could go beyond our agreement to ensure the system was fully functional. As I contemplated my options, one thing became clear. Whatever I decided would determine not just Alexander's fate, but potentially the future of Vanguard Systems itself, a company that, despite everything, had been my professional home for 20 years. I decided to fix the entire system, not for Alexander, but for the clients who depended on Vanguard's security products and the employees whose livelihoods were tied to the company's success. Working through 2 nights straight, I rebuilt the damaged authentication modules and implemented a robust update protocol that would prevent similar issues in the future. On the morning of the 3rd day, with the system repairs complete, I received an unexpected call from Alexander himself. Hazel, we need to talk, he began, his tone carefully modulated. The board has called a confidence vote for tomorrow. Before they decide, I'd like to offer you your position back, with a substantial raise and a seat on the leadership team. The desperation in his voice was evident. This wasn't an apology or a recognition of my value. It was a last-ditch attempt to save himself. I've already accepted a position elsewhere, I replied calmly. Whatever they're offering, I'll double it, he pressed. We've worked together for years, Hazel. Don't let one misunderstanding destroy that relationship. One misunderstanding? You fired me by text message after 20 years, calling me replaceable and outdated. That wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate choice. I made a mistake, he conceded, desperation creeping into his voice. I underestimated your contribution, but we can fix this. A fresh start. I'm not interested in a fresh start with Vanguard, I said firmly. I've completed the contracted fixes for the Hermes project. The system is stable and ready for the update. I've also prepared detailed documentation for the process going forward, which I'll send to Garrett today. Is there nothing I can say to change your mind? Yes, there is, I replied. You can say thank you for the 20 years I dedicated to Vanguard, for the nights and weekends I sacrificed, and for the innovations I contributed that were never officially recognized. You can acknowledge that experience has value alongside fresh perspectives. The line went silent for several seconds. Thank you, Alexander finally said, his voice subdued. For everything you did for Vanguard. You're welcome, I replied. The board's meeting is at 10 a.m. tomorrow, correct? Yes. Will you be speaking to them? Yes, Alexander, I will. I'll be telling them exactly what happened. Not to punish you, but because they deserve the truth about how their company is being managed. I ended the call knowing I had just sealed Alexander Patterson's fate as CEO of Vanguard Systems. 2 weeks later, I started my new position at Atlantic Data Services. My office there overlooked the Willamette River, and my team included both seasoned veterans and younger innovators who valued my experience. My first project was designing a comprehensive knowledge transfer system, ironically a solution to the very problem that had led to Vanguard's crisis. As for Vanguard, the aftermath of my testimony to the board was swift and decisive. Alexander Patterson was removed as CEO, with Robert temporarily stepping back into the role while they searched for a permanent replacement. The Hermes update proceeded without issues, thanks to my repairs and documentation. Garrett Davis called on my third day at Atlantic Data. Thought you'd want to know, he said. Robert's implementing a complete overhaul of our knowledge management systems. He's also instituted a new policy that all senior employee separations must include a minimum 30-day transition period with comprehensive knowledge transfer. Good to hear, I replied. That should prevent future crises. He's calling it the Winters Protocol, Garrett added. After you? I smiled at that, a small but meaningful acknowledgement of my legacy at Vanguard. 3 months later, I received a formal invitation to Vanguard's 25th anniversary celebration. A handwritten note from Robert was enclosed. Hazel, I hope you'll join us to celebrate Vanguard's history, a history you helped create. The new CEO would also like to meet the person whose institutional knowledge both challenged and ultimately strengthened the company. I decided to attend, not out of vindictiveness or desire to see Alexander's downfall, but to honor the 2 decades I had dedicated to building something valuable. The ultimate revenge wasn't bringing Alexander down or watching Vanguard struggle without me. It was thriving in a workplace that valued my contributions, helping build a culture where experience and innovation worked in harmony rather than opposition. As I settled into my new role at Atlantic Data, I felt no regret for having fixed Vanguard's systems before leaving. My professional integrity had never been about what I could destroy, but what I could build. A lesson Alexander Patterson had learned too late. The text message that had seemed so devastating on that Saturday morning had actually been a gift, pushing me out of a company that no longer valued me and into one that did. At 59, I wasn't replaceable and outdated after all. I was experienced, knowledgeable, and more valuable than ever. Sometimes the best revenge isn't bringing others down. It's rising higher than they ever thought you could.